They are coming for you, not with weapons you can see, not with armies marching down your street, not with anything loud enough for the world to notice, because the plan was never designed to be noticed. It was designed to work quietly, patiently, for years if it has to, until the version of you that used to burn with purpose becomes nothing more than a tired shadow going through the motions of a life that once meant something. They are coming for the one thing no security system can protect, not your house, not your bank account, your mind, your peace, your calling. And by the time most people realize what has been happening, they have already lost years to it without ever knowing they were even in a fight. Before this video ends, I'm going to show you 3 signs that this plan is already active in your life right now, whether you have noticed it or not. But stay with me until the end, because there is a 4th sign, the one almost nobody talks about, the one that only shows up after the other 3 have already done their damage, and if you recognize it in yourself, everything about your current season is about to make a lot more sense. Something has felt different lately. Maybe you cannot even put your finger on it, but you feel it. The peace that used to come so easily now feels far away, like it is standing on the other side of a locked door. The dreams that used to excite you now feel heavy, almost embarrassing to even think about out loud. You scroll longer than you used to. You pray less than you used to. You feel tired in a way that sleep does not seem to fix, no matter how early you go to bed. If any part of that just hit a little too close, listen carefully, because none of what you're feeling is random. And none of it is your fault in the way you probably think it is. There is a plan behind it. And today, that plan is being exposed, piece by piece, so that it can no longer operate in the dark corners of your life the way it has been. The Bible gives us a warning that most people read once and then completely forget. In Ephesians chapter 6, it says our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Read that again, slowly. Not flesh and blood, not your boss, not your family, not the stranger who cut you off in traffic this morning. Something far older, far more patient, and far more strategic than any human enemy you have ever faced in your life. And that something has a plan specifically written for you. A plan designed to keep you distracted, discouraged, disconnected, and eventually defeated long before you ever get close to the purpose you were created for. Let me tell you about a man. We will call him Daniel because his story could belong to almost anyone watching this right now, including maybe you. Daniel used to wake up early. He used to read. He used to pray. He used to believe with his whole chest that his life was moving somewhere important. Then, slowly, without a single dramatic moment he could ever point back to and say that is where it started, things began to shift. He started sleeping in, just a little. He told himself it was simply a busy season, and busy seasons pass. He stopped reading his Bible because he was tired, and promised himself he would catch up on the weekend. The weekend came and went. Weeks turned into months. He was still going to work every day, still smiling in photos, still showing up for everyone else who needed him. But inside, something had gone quiet. He had not lost his faith in one single dramatic moment. He had lost it one missed morning at a time, one skipped prayer at a time, one small surrender at a time that felt too small to even notice. And that, right there, is the first sign, not destruction, distraction. Sign number 1 is distraction. And here is exactly why it is the most effective weapon ever used against you. The enemy of your soul is not foolish enough to attack you with something you would immediately recognize as evil. He does not need to. All he needs is your attention, pulled just far enough away from what actually matters, for just long enough that you stop noticing the slow decline happening underneath the surface of your life. Distraction does not look like sin. It looks like busyness. It looks like a phone in your hand at midnight when you told yourself you would go to sleep an hour ago. It looks like a job that consumes every ounce of energy you have left for anything meaningful afterward. It looks like endless scrolling through other people's highlight reels while your own story sits completely untouched, waiting patiently for you to pick up the pen again. This is not an accident. This is a strategy refined over generations, and it works precisely because it feels harmless. Nobody ever warns you about the danger of a life spent constantly distracted, because on the surface, that life looks completely normal. It looks like everybody else's life. That is exactly the point. Even in Scripture, this pattern repeats itself over and over. The Israelites were given manna, fresh bread from heaven, every single morning in the wilderness. It was enough. It was provided. And yet, again and again, their attention drifted toward what they did not have instead of what was already in their hands. They grumbled about the food, they grumbled about the journey, they grumbled about the very freedom they had been begging God for while they were still slaves in Egypt. Distraction is nothing new. It is one of the oldest weapons in existence, and it still works today for exactly the same reason it worked thousands of years ago. It pulls your eyes off what matters and onto what does not, one small moment at a time, until an entire season of your life has quietly slipped through your fingers. But stay with me, because sign number 2 is even sneakier than the first, and this is the one that convinces good, faithful, hardworking people to quietly give up right when they were closest to their breakthrough. Sign number 2 is doubt. Doubt does not show up shouting. It shows up as a whisper, a quiet question slipped into the back of your mind during a hard season, sounding so much like your own voice that you never think to question where it actually came from. Is this really working? Is God even listening? Did I make the wrong choice? Am I too far behind now to ever catch up to where I should be? These questions feel like your own thoughts, which is exactly why they are so effective. You do not recognize them as an attack because they sound like you, spoken in your own inner voice, at your own quiet moments. But look closely at the pattern. Doubt almost never shows up when things are going well. It shows up the moment you get close to a breakthrough. It shows up right before the promotion, right before the reconciliation, right before the very moment your faith was about to be rewarded for everything it had endured. That timing is not a coincidence, it is a signature. And once you learn to recognize the signature, you can no longer be fooled by it the same way ever again. Think about Gideon hiding in a winepress, threshing wheat in secret because he was terrified of the enemy just outside. An angel appears and calls him a mighty warrior, and Gideon's first response is not confidence, it is doubt. He questions why. If God is truly with them, everything looks the way it currently does. He questions his own family, his own tribe, his own qualifications, and yet that same doubting, hiding, uncertain man became the one who led Israel to victory against overwhelming odds. Doubt did not disqualify him. It simply tried to convince him to disqualify himself before the real battle had even begun. That is exactly what doubt is trying to do to you right now, in whatever situation you are currently facing. It is not trying to prove you are wrong. It is trying to convince you to quit before you find out you were right. Think about Thomas, one of the 12, standing in a locked room after the resurrection, listening to the other disciples describe something he desperately wanted to believe, but simply could not make himself accept without proof. History remembers him by a single word, doubting, as if that one season defined his entire life. But look at what actually happened next. He was not cast out for his doubt. He was not abandoned for asking hard questions. He was met, personally, directly, in the exact place his doubt lived and given exactly what he needed to move forward. Doubt did not disqualify Thomas from being one of the very people who carried the message of the resurrection to the rest of the world. It simply became the place where he was met honestly before he was strengthened. Your doubt does not disqualify you either. It is simply the doorway where you are about to be met, if you are willing to stay in the room instead of walking out of it. Now here is sign number 3, and this one is the quietest of them all, because it almost never looks dangerous while it is happening. Sign number 3 is isolation. Isolation rarely looks like loneliness at first. It looks like independence. It looks like telling yourself you do not need anyone else checking in on you, that you can handle this completely on your own, that reaching out would only be a burden to someone else who has their own problems to deal with. It looks like skipping the gathering because you are too tired, too behind, too embarrassed about where your life currently stands compared to where you thought you would be by now. It looks like watching everyone else's life unfold from a distance, instead of stepping back into community and letting people actually see you. And slowly, without a single dramatic event marking the moment, you find yourself standing completely alone, exactly where the plan wanted you the entire time. Because a person surrounded by community can be strengthened, corrected, and reminded of the truth the moment they start to forget it. A person standing alone has no one left to remind them of anything at all. Elijah understood this better than almost anyone in Scripture. after one of the greatest victories of his entire life. Calling down fire from heaven in front of an entire nation, he ran into the wilderness alone, sat down under a juniper tree, and asked God to let him die. The very next thing God did was not rebuke him. It was feed him, let him sleep, feed him again, and then gently ask him a question. What are you doing here, Elijah? Alone. Notice that word, alone. Even one of the most powerful prophets who ever lived was not immune to the isolation trap, especially right after his greatest victory, when he should have felt the strongest. If it can happen to him, it can happen to you, and it can happen to me. And recognizing it early is the entire difference between a short season of struggle and years lost to a battle. Nobody around you even knew you were fighting. David understood this same trap from a different angle. Long before he was crowned king, he spent years running, hiding in caves, surrounded by men who were themselves in debt, in distress, and discontented, hunted relentlessly by a king who once loved him and now wanted him dead. It would have been the easiest thing in the world for David to decide that isolation was simply his destiny, to conclude that he was meant to live and die alone in the wilderness, forgotten by everyone who once celebrated him. Instead, in cave after cave, David kept writing. He kept singing. He kept talking to God even when God felt completely silent. Some of the most powerful words ever written in the book of Psalms were written by a man hiding in a hole in the ground, refusing to let isolation convince him that he had been forgotten. If isolation could not silence David in a literal cave, it does not get to silence you either, no matter what your current version of that cave looks like. Distraction pulls your eyes away from what matters. Doubt weakens your grip on what you already know to be true. Isolation removes the very support system that could have caught you before you fell too far. And once all three of these are firmly in place, the fourth sign moves in almost effortlessly, quietly finishing what the first three started. This is the sign I promised you at the very beginning of this video, the one almost nobody talks about. That fourth sign is despair. And this is the sign the entire plan has been building toward from the very first distracted morning. Despair does not always look dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it looks like a person who has simply stopped trying, stopped dreaming, stopped believing that tomorrow could possibly look any different from today. It is the quiet surrender of someone who used to have fire behind their eyes. Now just going through the motions, convinced deep down that this is simply how life is going to be for them from now on, and there is no point fighting against it anymore. If you're watching this right now and something in your chest just tightened, because some part of this describes exactly where you have been living lately, I want you to hear me clearly before we go any further. You have not lost. You have simply been under attack, in a battle nobody ever taught you how to see, let alone how to fight. That ends today right here in this video, because here is the part they never wanted you to fully understand. A plan that can be exposed is a plan that can be defeated. The moment you can name the weapon being used against you, that weapon loses the majority of its power over you instantly. Distraction cannot control a person who has learned to guard their attention on purpose. Doubt cannot control a person who has learned to recognize its voice for what it is and refuse to obey it automatically. Isolation cannot control a person who chooses, even when it feels hard, to stay connected to others no matter how badly they feel like disappearing. And despair simply cannot survive for long in a life that keeps choosing hope again and again, one small decision at a time, even when that hope feels forced at first. Before I show you exactly how to fight back against every single one of these, I want you to understand something about timing, because this changes everything about how you see your current season. If you feel like you are being tested right now, if resistance seems to be showing up in every direction you turn, no matter what you try, that is not proof that you are failing. That is proof that you are close. Nobody builds an elaborate, patient, multi-stage plan to stop a person who is not actually going anywhere. Nobody works this hard to distract, discourage, isolate, and eventually crush the hope of someone whose life does not truly matter. The intensity of what you are currently facing is direct proof of the size of what you're walking toward. Read that sentence again if you need to, because it might be the single most important thing you hear all week. Now let me walk you through exactly how this plan gets dismantled, piece by piece, starting today, starting with this very video. The first sign was distraction. So the first weapon you take back is your attention. This does not require some massive, overwhelming life overhaul. It requires one decision, repeated daily. small enough to actually keep. Choose on purpose, where your first few minutes and your last few minutes of every single day are going to go. Not to a screen, not to noise, to silence, to stillness, to a single page of scripture, to one honest moment of gratitude before your feet even hit the floor in the morning. Small, yes, but small, repeated daily, becomes unstoppable over enough time. The plan depends entirely on you never noticing where your attention has drifted. The counterattack is simply noticing and choosing again, every single day, without needing to be perfect at it. The second sign was doubt, so the second weapon you take back is discernment. Every single time a thought enters your mind telling you that God has forgotten you, that you are too far gone, that your prayers are hitting the ceiling and going absolutely nowhere, I want you to stop and ask yourself one question. With the God who spoke the ocean into its boundaries, who set every star in place with nothing but a word, who counted every hair on your head before you were even formed, really abandon you in the middle of your own story? The answer is no. Every single time you ask it honestly, the answer is no. Doubt cannot survive for long in a mind that has learned to talk back to it with truth, instead of silently absorbing every accusation as established fact. The third sign was isolation, so the third weapon you take back is connection. This one is uncomfortable because it requires you to do the exact opposite of what despair is quietly telling you to do. It tells you to hide, show up anyway. It tells you that no one would understand what you're going through. Reach out anyway, send the message you have been avoiding, make the call you keep putting off. Walk back into the room you have been quietly staying away from for months. You were never designed to fight this particular battle completely alone, and the fact that isolation works this effectively as a weapon is direct proof of exactly how much you were built for genuine community in the first place. And the fourth sign, despair, is defeated the moment you choose hope on purpose. Even before you fully feel it again, feelings follow action far more often than action follows feelings. You do not need to feel hopeful to start acting hopeful. Get up anyway, show up anyway, believe again, even while trembling, even in total uncertainty, even while the tears are still drying on your face from the night before. That single act of defiant, deliberate hope is the exact moment the entire plan against you begins to quietly fall apart. There is a second story worth telling here about a woman we will call Grace, because so many people watching this will recognize pieces of themselves in her. Grace was not someone who had walked away from her faith in some dramatic, visible way. She still went to church most weeks. She still said the right things when people asked how she was doing. But privately, she had stopped believing that her life would ever look the way she had once hoped it would. She had quietly given up on the marriage she had prayed for, the healing she had prayed for, the breakthrough she had prayed for so many times that the words had started to feel empty in her own mouth. And then, one ordinary evening, a friend she had been avoiding for weeks reached out anyway, refused to let the silence continue, and simply asked her one honest question. When did you stop believing anything could change? Grace did not have an answer right away, but that single question cracked something open that had been sealed shut for a long time. She did not fix everything that night, but she started showing up again. She started praying again, even when it felt awkward and forced. She started reaching back out to the people she had been quietly pulling away from, and slowly, month by month, the fog that had settled over her life began to lift, not because her circumstances changed overnight, but because she stopped cooperating with the plan that had been working against her in silence for so long. There is one more thing you need to understand before this video ends, and it might be the most important piece of the entire plan. Out of every weapon the enemy uses, distraction, doubt, isolation, and despair, none of them are actually the final goal. They are only tools, aimed at one single target underneath all of them. That target is your identity. The entire plan, from the very first distracted morning to the quietest moment of despair, exists to convince you of one lie, whispered so consistently over time that it starts to feel like fact. The lie that you are not who you were told you are, not chosen, not called, not loved without condition, not capable of the very purpose that was placed inside you before you ever took your first breath. This is exactly why worship is treated as such a threat. Not singing for the sake of singing, but the act of deliberately reminding yourself, out loud, in your own voice, of who you actually belong to. Every time you speak truth over your own life, instead of silently accepting the whisper, you are not performing some small, symbolic ritual. You are actively renewing your mind, tearing down exactly the kind of stronghold that distraction, doubt, isolation, and despair spent months or years quietly building inside you. This is why the enemy would always rather you scroll for another 20 minutes than sit in silence for 2. This is why noise is so much easier to find than stillness. Silence is where identity gets remembered. Noise is where it quietly gets buried. So here is one final weapon to add to everything you have already learned tonight. Every single day, speak your identity out loud before the world gets a chance to define it for you. Before the phone, before the messages, before the noise of everyone else's opinions and expectations. Say who you actually are, according to the God who made you, not according to your worst season, your last mistake, or your current circumstances. This single habit, small as it sounds, is one of the most effective counterattacks against everything you have learned about today. Because an enemy cannot easily distract, doubt, isolate, or discourage a person who already knows exactly who they are and refuses to forget it, no matter how loud the noise gets around them. I told you at the start of this video that they are coming for you. That was never meant to frighten you into staying stuck in fear. It was meant to prepare you, to wake you up, to hand you the map to a battle you have already been fighting whether you realized it or not. Because once you can see the plan clearly, laid out in front of you like this, you stop being a target who does not even know they are being hunted. And you become someone who walks through life with their eyes wide open, fully aware, fully alert, and completely unwilling to hand over their peace without a real fight. There is a verse tucked into the book of James that most people skim right past without ever slowing down to notice it. It says, "Resist the enemy, and he will flee from you." Not fight forever, with no end ever in sight. Resist, and he flees. There is an expiration date built into this battle the moment you stop cooperating with the plan working against you. Every single day you choose attention over distraction, truth over doubt, connection over isolation, and hope over despair. You are not simply surviving. You are actively, deliberately dismantling a strategy that was built specifically, patiently, over time to stop you from ever becoming who you were originally created to be. I want you to think back to that quiet feeling from the very beginning of this video, the one you could not quite explain, that sense that something has shifted, that peace has felt further away than it used to feel. Now you know why, and more importantly, now you know exactly what to do about it. This is not a coincidence, that out of everything you could have been watching right now, you are here, hearing this, at exactly the moment you needed to hear it most. That is not luck. That is the same hand that has been quietly writing your story since long before you were even born, reaching into your feed, into your algorithm, into your ordinary day, to remind you that the plan against you has now been exposed in full detail, and it no longer has to keep working on you the way it has. So here's what I want you to do before this video ends. I want you to speak one sentence out loud, right now, wherever you are, even if you feel a little silly doing it. Say it like you mean it, even if your voice shakes a little on the way out. Say, "I see the plan, and I'm not walking into it blind anymore." Say it again if you need to hear yourself say it twice. Let it settle all the way down into your chest, because the moment you speak truth out loud, it stops being just a passing thought floating through your mind, and it becomes a declaration, spoken over your own life, in your own voice. If this video reached you at exactly the right moment, if something in here quietly named a feeling you have carried for a long time but never had the words for, do not let this be a video you simply watch once and forget by tomorrow morning. Type the words standing in the comments below, so that everyone else scrolling through can see they are not the only one who needed to hear this today, in this exact season of their life. And if you want more of this, more truth that actually names what is happening quietly beneath the surface of your life instead of just skimming across the top, subscribe and turn on notifications, because there is a deeper part of this story still coming. One that goes even further into exactly how the timing of these attacks works, and why the enemy always seems to strike right before your breakthrough instead of after it. You will not want to miss that one. But before you go, I want to leave you with one final promise, an old one, tucked into the book of Isaiah, that says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." Notice it does not say no weapon will be formed. It says clearly, plainly, weapons will be formed, plans will be made, attacks will come, patient and calculated. But formed is not the same word as successful. A plan can be built against you with real precision, with genuine patience, with strategy refined over years of quiet pressure, and still fail completely, simply because you refuse to walk into it unaware any longer. That is exactly the position you are standing in right now, aware, awake, no longer distracted without noticing it happening, no longer doubting without questioning where the thought actually came from, no longer isolating without consciously resisting the pull to disappear, no longer despairing without actively fighting back with hope. Chosen on purpose, one ordinary day at a time. They came for your attention, and you are learning to guard it fiercely. They came for your confidence, and you are learning to question the whisper instead of quietly obeying it. They came for your community, and you're learning to reach back out instead of pulling further away into silence. They came for your hope, and today, right now, in this very moment, you are choosing to hold on to it anyway, whether it feels strong yet or not. The plan was real. The plan was patient. The plan was working, quietly, for far longer than you probably ever realized. But a plan that has been fully exposed in the light can no longer operate the same way it once did in the dark. You were not shown this today by accident. You were shown this because it is time to walk differently. Time to wake up on purpose. Time to guard your attention. Question the doubt. Reach for connection and choose hope, one ordinary decision at a time, until the version of you that felt stuck, tired, and distant becomes nothing more than a memory of a season you walked completely out of, one you can look back on and testify about, instead of one that is still quietly controlling you. They are coming for you, but now you know exactly what that means and exactly what to do about it. So stand up, take a breath, and walk back into your life today like someone who finally understands the fight they have actually been in this entire time. Because you do understand it now, and from this moment forward, you never have to walk into it unaware again.